Okay, all right, everyone. Welcome. Hello and welcome to everyone to our series on immersive 3D learning. I'm Jessica Millstone. I'm one of the organizers of the over 8,000 member New York EdTech Meetup in New York City, here in New York City. And I'm also managing director at Copperwire Ventures, which is a new early stage investment fund supporting women-led technology companies. All the participants in this series that we're doing, this three-part series on immersive learning, have been fascinated for years by the ways in which immersive technologies like VR can radically change levels of student engagement and also their understanding and learning about the subject matter. We think, and I hope some of you guys who have come to our discussion today agree, that now is finally the moment when the needs of teachers and students are matched with the technology available to them. And finally, while the series is not exclusively about how to reimagine teaching and learning in the age of COVID, it will definitely be part of our conversation. So we're going to get to it. Today, we are meeting Emily Jolie from Ape Lab's Zoe AR and VR creation tool, who is, of course, also one of the hosts of this series, and Kwaku Anning, Director of the Center for Innovation and Entrepreneurial Thinking at the San Diego Jewish Academy. Each one of them will do a show and tell about the ways in which students are able to build their own VR stories using Zoe. I'm gonna let each of them introduce themselves before they start their presentation. And then afterwards, we'll come back together for a quick discussion. Please use the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen to submit some questions of your own for either one of the speakers. And let's get to it. Emily, why don't we start with you?
Yeah, thanks. Thanks a lot, Jessica. We're super excited to have you as the host of this whole series. Just a quick introduction about me. I'm the CEO and I'm the co-founder of Ape Lab and one of the multiple people working behind Zoe. And Zoe really allows students to become creators of interactive, immersive worlds. A little bit quickly about my background. So I'm an interaction designer initially, and we actually started building the first version of these tools where we were at university. So that was about 8 to 10 years ago. We had one artist in the team. He had a deadline. He had no idea how to code, no clue, and he needed to get his bachelor project in. So we kind of started building this for him to help him out. And he ended up graduating with honors, getting his project out there, started a company. So now basically, you know, as a mission for us is we're super excited to share with younger students globally and empower them to create their own adventures now, like we did. And talking about empowering students, our amazing guest today has been doing that for a while. Hi, Kwaku.
Hey, how's it going? Thank you both, Jess and Emily, for inviting me to be part of this conversation. The idea of promoting women within EdTech is amazing and needs to happen more. A little bit about me, I have been in education for, at this point, literally 20 years. I started off as a K-5 music teacher in Harlem, and I've worked in charter public schools as a technology consultant for teachers, and now I work in independent schools. And I'm just really excited to talk about how Emily is empowering students that I work with and other students to learn through creating and also through immersive technology.
Thank you. And we met you and I at the HTC offices. I remember pretty well. I think
was that 4 years?
I think so. It was pretty random. I mean, we met and you were working on with your students, and we had this first version of the Unity plugin of Zoe.
That's right.
And so you kind of started using that with your students at one point. So maybe you can tell us a little bit about what the students did at the time and why you started seeing the benefits of them using VR for creation.
Great question. So at the time that I met you, I was working with we started a small VR club in our school. It wasn't really a VR club, it was really a design club. The kids just didn't know it. And so the kids were working on creating a VR escape room using Unity. And so we had kids coming in and out, they were playing sports, they were in plays, that sort of thing. And one of the kids who was in the club was really into VR, but he leaned more towards the arts than coding. He's not a typical coder or someone who really understood C#. And so he really wanted to work on a side project where he built out this green efficient home, and he was concerned about how he'd be able to do it without the help of other students. And so after meeting Emily, I was like, hey, Emily, can you send me access to this for this student so that he can, test it out, but also as a way to sort of empower him to not let the technology block his creativity. And what the kid created was absolutely stunning with the first version of Zoe. And he was able to display it, as part of this big presentation to all the other kids in the school. And they were just blown away. They're like, well, how did you build this? And he's like, oh, I use this tool. And that was pretty much the introduction to Zoe for me and the students that I work with.
I'm so excited you were able to do that. And I think, we also want to talk a little bit about the project that we did last summer. So last summer, Kwaku and our team, we kind of, went together to do this pilot with your Chinese students and students in your school. I just want to go through a little bit about what that process was, for that camp. What was the thought process? And I'm just show a few images, and you can talk a little bit about how that camp was structured, and then kind of what the challenges were in setting it up, and what were the outcomes of doing a camp like that. So tell a bit more about that, and I'll just share some images of it as we go.
So last summer was my first year in my current role, and I decided to do another VR/design camp. And we did something interesting where we brought in students from China to partner up with students from my school to create VR content specifically around sustainability development goals, the UN goals around climate change, and how to build either immersive environments or experiences to teach people around these goals. And so teach people about these goals. So in this project, the students had a really strict design constraint where they had to build something around the three sisters approach to gardening, where the idea you have these three different types of vegetables that benefit each other as they grow. And so what you see here is kids actually doing a ton of storyboarding and really coming up with a narrative for the experience that their users would have before they actually started building things out. And so one of the questions that you brought up was about the challenges that the students had through this process. And there were basically two. Challenge number one was managing headset time in two ways. One, you're building something out in a 2D form. You're building something for a 3D format, but you're building it out in 2D. So you're going back and forth in headsets. And because there isn't really definitive information around what VR does to students, I'm really strict about keeping students to fit a 15-minute maximum before they take a break. The second challenge was actually the piece I just mentioned, the idea of taking something 2D and making it 3D and making it accurate. We had a lot of students who would place a bunch of objects into a scenario, and you'd put on the headset and you'd go into the scene and you're standing on top of a cow. And so, something they couldn't actually see when they were building it out in 2D. So there was a lot of going back and forth. And finally, I love that you brought this up. Because when we did our final presentation, these were sort of the initial designs and story mapping pieces that the students put together before they started actually creating their VR experiences. And the parents were blown away because they thought they just spent the week in front of computers, but literally almost half of the week, and this was all done in 5 days, the students were doing that before they even got into building things out with the tools that Emily and her team brought in.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that I remember from that camp is we started by showing them virtual reality software. So we started by showing them Google Blocks that they're using in this video now, which is really you're in 3D and you're creating your 3D models. And then only after that, we went to a flat Unity interface. And for them, that flat 2D interface, they couldn't understand it as well as they would the 3D one. It was something for them that was weird and complicated. Suddenly, the 3D version of it was so easy, but then the Unity bit and the flat surface was like, what is that? How am I supposed to even use that? They couldn't use it. So that was like an interesting, for us, at least as a tool company, takeaway into building new tools and how to make them, very easy for the students. These are just some screens of the 3D models they built during the process, right?
And the great, especially if you're thinking about this as an educator, the really great part about this was the moment that kids went from, oh, this is an idea, this would be really cool if this could happen, to, oh, well, look, I built this thing out. Here's the 3D object that I was talking about. And then fast forwarding to them displaying it to their parents and having their siblings and their parents play it, what they created, and the parents just being blown away by what they were able to put together in 5 days. So imagine if they could do something like this within 5 days, what could they do over weeks or over months? And what are the types of ideas that they could bring to reality?
Yeah, this is an image of the Zoe for Unity part of things, where suddenly
I want to jump in with a question if I can, just because a couple people have already written in some questions and I don't want to give the wrong answers. And you're talking about the camp specifically, that you said it was 5 days, but how many hours per day were they doing camp?
Good question. The camps were 9 to 3:30.
Yeah,
and
so
then
a full
they
day.
would full day with an hour off for lunch, and breaks built in, but basically, yeah, full day camp.
Yeah. How would you say that you split that up between the kind of like project-based learning, like planning part of it, and then the actual like tech time?
So the very beginning of this week of camp, we spent by just reviewing those UN goals. And then we actually brought in this gentleman who was, I forget his exact title, but he's essentially he focused on regenerative farming, where he talked to the kids about the three sister approach. So I think it was it was corn, squash, and beans. And the idea that the corn provides shade for the squash, which is on the ground, and then the beans could grow up along the beans grew along the corn stalk to allow it the space to grow. And then the beans also put out I think it was nitrous, or was it carbon dioxide? I forget which one, but essentially that there were these three pieces that work together to not only preserve soil but also produce food. And so we spent basically a day and a half on that. And then after that, it was probably a day and a half on design, or maybe 2 days. And then the last 2 days, it was like a real sprint to have the students complete and finish their final ideas. But within there, and Emily can talk more about that, within the design process, they literally had to pitch to everyone else in the room what they wanted to create. And if it didn't make sense, then they didn't get to build it. They had to really think through what it was they were going to build before building it.
And then just really quickly, Emily, is Zoe compatible with Oculus Quest? We had like a very tech question about that.
Yes, so that's the main platform. And so just we're going to go into a demo in like 2 minutes. So we're going to show you Zoe for VR. So yeah, there's the Unity plugin, but we have a virtual reality app now that we created after, we started during that summer camp building it out, but we wanted to pilot all of this before, understanding what the right features were. So we're going to be going into Zoe VR in a few seconds, and it does run on Oculus Quest. Yes.
Okay.
No need for computer, which is great.
Oh, I'm going to say one more thing. Someone has a question in here about the options for virtual teams. We're going to talk about that in a little bit as well.
Yeah, that makes sense. Cool. So I was also wanted to talk a little bit about what are the typical topics or classes that you see being interesting to use these types of software, and if there are any specific type of classes or topics that you think stand out and would benefit from that type of approach.
So it's funny, we talked about this a little bit the other day, and I think this lends itself to everything. Essentially, first when I started talking to Emily about using this in our school going into this year, and this is pre-COVID, I wanted to use it for an anatomy class, because a science teacher came to me and she said, hey, I have these students and there's a level of what I'm teaching where it just is not resonating with them. Is there any way we could use VR for this? And I was like, oh yeah, we totally have the product for it. And as we were prepping for that and also trying to get the hardware for it, that's when COVID hit. But the class currently on campus that uses VR the most is an art class, where it's a 3D design class where the teacher has the students building things out as far as 3D objects and telling stories within VR. But it's the same sort of thing where there's a whole piece where they have to draw whatever the symbol that they decide on as a group from 3 different angles. And then they have to, they actually met with someone who worked in an advertising firm who talked about the process of going from symbols to stories. Then they need to develop out a storyboard. And then from there, they're able to partner up. And so to answer the question before, what we do is we have the kids work in teams, and we have a Quest, and we have an iPad, and we stream to the iPad so the kids can go back and forth, but both can still be part of the design process. So that's a long way of saying, Emily, I think this applies to every subject: humanities, history, English, science, art. There might even be a level of music in this as well.
Yeah, probably. You're probably right with that. I think it's a good time to kind of go on the demo, right? And then
yeah, let's do that.
Look around, see what we can do, show you some stuff. Let's see if it works.
All right, so I'm going to talk a little bit while you're getting set up here.
Yeah, go ahead.
Let's see. Well, there's a question here. There's a controversy about VR headsets and not being suitable for children under 13. And that is a really good point. And I make it the camp that I'm actually working on for this year, which I'm going to talk about a little bit later. That is the age group that's the age that I cut it off at. I know some educators use it with students that are younger. I just don't feel comfortable about it. I just don't feel comfortable about having actual proof that it wouldn't negatively affect a kid under the age of 13. So I just don't use it with kids under 13. And even with kids who are 13, I'm really, really, really strict about limiting how much time they're in VR at once.
Yeah, actually, I think that's actually what the research really talks about, is like how long they're in VR, even more than their age.
Right.
So that's probably a really good way to think about it too, is like just sort of chunking things up in a way that you're, and it sounds like you do that with your students, like one's in VR and the other is designing off, on just like a flat tablet of some sort. Like you're basically, chunking up like how much time you spend in the actual headset.
Yeah, one thing that we're doing also on our end for that is having a way for the educators and teachers to easily manage all of this. So being able to put students in groups and then managing how long the sessions are. Like because you can stay in there, and also during the pilot, we noticed that students can stay in there for a little while without noticing they're actually been in there for 45 minings. So having those kinds of easy control to say, okay, now you're doing 20 minutes and then stop. It's like, turn to someone else or anything like that. And also building out a way for them to connect through their mobile phones so that you don't have you don't need to only have headsets for everybody either. So these are some of the things we're kind of working on these days.
Love it. Emily,
that's a great support.
Are you almost ready here?
I think I'm ready. If you're seeing my screen properly.
Yep, we're seeing you.
Yeah, I took the challenge you gave me, which is supposedly my breakfast in the morning, right?
So yeah, I gave Emily the challenge. She's like, what should I show? Because it's so open, which is great, but what could she show in a few minutes just to give people a taste of it? And I'm a huge fan of allowing kids to create stories or interactions that tie into the world that they see. And so basically I gave her the challenge, Emily, the challenge of creating a scenario of a kid who's basically detailing what they see in the morning before they come to school. So apparently before Emily goes to school, her cat's just hanging out on the kitchen table.
Oh, definitely.
I'd be a fan of that.
That's just what the cat does all day. So yeah, well, my apartment is really not as big as this, but I don't know, I kind of started going crazy and making the apartment the way I would like it. It's actually a lot tinier than that, but so I can just show you a little bit what I built, and I'm not going to do too long, but the goal is just to give you a taste of what this is and how it works. You might hear also there's construction happening in my building, which is great, but if you can't hear me, let me know. At least you have images.
You sound good. You sound good.
Thank you. So yeah, so in my morning, usually my cat wants to eat stuff, so he really likes donuts, so I did a little thing where when I give him the donut, he says meow. So I literally just did that 5 minutes ago before the panel. And one thing you can notice is this thing has no physics at all. So there's a couple of different functionalities in Zoe where you can go and take all those models. They come from either the students have built them themselves and they're available in a library, which I can show you, but let's say this donut now, we want it to have gravity because it should behave like a donut. And a donut normally has gravity, right? So now if I grab it again, it does work properly like a donut should, which is really interacting with the physics of the scene and all the other objects. And so you can really take anything. You can model whatever you want and then put it in there and then start kind of creating the experience, adding the right physics objects and adding all the interactions. What else do I have in my scene? We can do something. We can also, let's say, for example, I want to change that text to something different. So I can go in here, and then I have this very nice, gigantic keyboard that I can use and type something else. So let's say I want to type, thank you.
You have a very polite cat. I just want to say
Yeah,
that.
it is. Well, yeah. Yeah. Let's say that. You're welcome. Okay, that's it. So there's that. What else did I have the time to do? I did. Oh,
That did actually look like musical instruments as you were typing it out. You sort
Didn't
of,
it? Yeah.
you can also have like some drumsticks or some xylophone mallets kind of thing.
Yeah,
the
there you go.
keyboard.
Yeah, the keyboard.
It's a fun keyboard. It's a very cool key. It's actually nice to type on it in VR, much nicer than pointing at things. And then here, I usually water my plants. I did it this morning. They were almost dead because there's too much sun these days, but you know, and if I do this, then
oh, that's awesome.
So I can just show you maybe quickly how I created that interaction. So I'm gonna remove that sunflower from the scene and then add a new one. So in here, there's a menu and you can pull in kind of any assets that you want. There's a local library, which has a lot of assets that we build in. And then there's another one called Poly. So this is great if you do tilt brush classes, and Kwaku, you can talk a little bit more about that afterwards because you have an art teacher who's going to be using this remotely over summer. But so basically you get all those assets, and if I can find, I don't know, what else can I grow in a, let's say a carrot? There you go. And so now I can go in here, and here I have all the interactions. So the first one is give treat, so it's the one for the kitty. And then this one is to get the flower to grow. And what I did is I'm saying that when the water can, so that object, is colliding with the carrot, all good, then I want my action to be scale. So I want my carrot to scale of, I don't know, whatever I think is good. Let's make a huge carrot here. And then it'll take 2 seconds for the carrot to grow. And so now when I click play and I take the water can and I do this, then my carrot grows.
Wow.
So this is like the very, very, since this is only an overview, we'll do more of those webinars where we go really in depth on all the, you know, all the technical aspects of Zoe, but this just gives you a taste of how quick it is to build out interactions and then add new things and change things as you go. And yeah, I don't know if there's any specific questions, or Kwaku, if you have an idea, I can do something else, but this is, you know, kind of the overall thing of it.
There's one question here from Nisha Rahim. I think I know you, Nisha. Anyway, there's a question here from Nisha, and she was asking about using Zoe. Is it available to students directly, or can students only access this in school? Emily, do you want to talk to that? I can talk to it as well, but I figured you might want to talk.
I can, well, for now, we're really making it for schools at the moment. So we don't have like a plan for students to do it directly on their own. But, you know, if you want to add to that, feel free to do it.
So I think that's it's almost like a COVID question, if you will. And so this ties into Sherry's question about the options of virtual teams to work on this, which I think that's something that Emily can talk about more. So to answer your question, the camp that I'm working on this summer will actually be off campus because campus is closed. And so students, the students that I'm going to be working with, they will have access to headsets where they can do this remotely. So if you either are in a situation where your school has the means to purchase headsets and lend out to school or lend out to students, then they wouldn't be tied to doing it there. So that's one level of the answer. But I also know that Emily and her team are working on a version of this that would work mobily, meaning on either a phone or a tablet or something like that. And so then that would also give students the ability to continue to work on this, maybe not in VR, but to work on the same file outside of the four walls of a school building. The other piece, the other question here that Sherry asked about the options for virtual teams to work on this. So this summer, the version of the camp that we're going to do, we're going to have students basically email the files back and forth to each other, because we have kids partnering up. But, and I'm sure Emily will talk more about this, she and her team are actually working on a version of this. I don't know how much of this you want to share. I've just started.
Oh, no, it's fine. Of course it's fine.
Okay.
We've tested it this morning. So yeah, to answer some of those questions there. So we're clearly building Zoe so that you can do it, either in the classroom context or outside at home, or we were just trying to make it so that it's easier for you to do either in something that's also kind of more blended, where the students are going to be maybe in class for a couple hours. When they go back home, they can do their homework, at home as well. So I think the mobile bit, as you mentioned, ties into that. So being able to do it also on your phone. And we were working on that. And then for the co-creation piece that you're talking about, I guess that's the multi-user side of things. So we're basically building a way for everybody to be in the same virtual room and build together. So the way I just did now, you would have all the students and the teacher working all together in the same scene, and then being able to break them down into groups and just basically being there as a, well, you're going to be a 3D avatar, of course, of yourself, but it'll enable someone, doing camps with someone in China, in the US, and in France together. So that's we're super excited about that, and the opportunities for that for next year, for fall, basically.
So while we're on the subject though of the virtual version of this, like what are some of the things that you think VR specifically VR creation tools, what can they improve on, like sort of in the remote setting? Like, is there something about the way that you use a tool like this that makes it particularly great for remote teaching?
Yeah, I think that's one for Kwaku, probably.
Yeah. At the end of the day, I think all of us who work in schools, we miss the concept of presence when sharing concepts. Even right now, it would be great if we were all in one location where we could talk about that and we can look in someone's eye. Like on our end, we can't see anybody. You can see us, but we can't see any of you. And so the idea to be able to see a head nod or to see a level of inquisitiveness or confusion to sort of make that connection in a nonverbal way. And the beauty of this, and I think it's just coming to light where people are starting to notice it more, but the ability to have immersiveness and create that connection through literally fooling your brain into thinking that you are right next to something, that in the age of COVID learning or distance learning is immense. And as great as Zoom is, I'm not making fun of Zoom, that it really takes the teaching piece to another level. And the evidence of that is when you're in a classroom with students who are working in VR, and if something happens and maybe you accidentally brush up against them and they jump out of their skin because they lose space, they lose concept of time and space. And if you're tying that to learning a concept, that is pretty much, that's nirvana. That's where we're trying to all get, I think, as educators.
Yeah. Actually, Emily, you said it too, like that the keyboard actually had quite a nice feeling. It had that feedback, like when you were using it, and there's something like it gives you a sense of being in a space, like an actual space with people and with objects that the flat video platform doesn't. But I miss the in-person stuff too, obviously.
Oh yeah, I think we all miss the in-person stuff too as well. But it's it's something different to be in a 3D space with we do that with my team now that we're kind of testing this remote learning, this remote solution stuff, and they are in Geneva. So I am in LA and some of our team are in Geneva. So we're kind of working like that and being able to be in that same room and talking to each other and just exchanging an object to each other. It's just, it just makes a huge difference because we miss seeing them, live as well, but it makes it so much more efficient. And Kwaku, the other day, we were showing Zoe to about 100 students at the same time on Zoom, and they were there to take a course, but the course was all day on Zoom. And you really felt like the students were tired. And me, I was only there for, I don't know, 30 minutes, 45 minutes, an hour to show them. And then they were asking questions and things, but I was so exhausted after that hour. I can't, imagine them after a whole day of going like that. So I think it's all about balancing. And that's something you talked about, Kwaku, as well, like balancing the design phase and balancing the NVR phase. And all of these things are things that we're also building into Zoe, because it's also our background to help with all the interaction design part of things, project planning, management, teamwork, brainstorming.
All soft skills.
Yeah, the soft skills. And actually someone had a question about that. Like, is it challenging for some students, and have you overcome, is also a question for Kwaku, like how have you overcome the challenges, either the technical challenges or the kind of conceptual challenges of doing VR with young people?
That's a good question. It is challenging, but I think that ties into the concept of productive struggle. Whenever I'm working with kids, specifically with VR, I always explain to them, first of all, this is your project, not mine. My job is to make sure you have everything you need to be as creative as possible, but this is not a test. This is not multiple choice. You're not going to get this right. You are going to come up with an idea, and your idea might just be okay initially, and that's fine. And you're going to do stuff wrong. That is built into this. And tied to what Emily's saying, these are the skills that employers are going to want from them 10 years, 5 years down the road. How do you handle struggling with something and eventually finding the answer, or do you just give up? So from that perspective, it is a struggle. And whether you're in an independent school, a charter school, or a public school, a lot of our students have not been taught that failure is good, because it leads to a deeper level of whatever you're trying to get to. And so this is one of the best ways to do it, because even your failure is kind of spectacular because the experience is so great.
It's not passive learning at all. It's not an hour on Zoom. I mean, it's really like you're really in it. And you, like you said, you were doing it from 9 to 3. I mean, even though not every moment of that is in the headset, it's a long day, and it's a lot of focus and, but happy focus, like happily, working hard.
Emily could talk about it. We had to kick them out of the room. We'd have to say, go for a walk, get out of here. And this is in San Diego, where it's sunny and 70 degrees every day, and they didn't want to leave. So,
another question for Kwaku, and then a couple of like technical questions, I think, for Emily that you want to answer. Matthew is asking, I wonder what was the reaction of teachers to the use of some tools, with the use of such tools? Were they amazed, open, dubious? Like how do teachers that are not the innovation specialist?
Right.
Exactly.
Right. So, all right, I'm gonna answer this question. I'm gonna use it really briefly to talk about what we're doing this summer. There's a range of reactions from teachers, and this goes back to 6 years ago when I was a consultant for DOE schools, and I was just introducing Google tools to teachers. Some teachers would be like, absolutely not, I'm not using that, this is what I do. And me, I was a little devious. I'd be like, that's perfectly fine. And I'd work with teachers who work with the same kids, and essentially 2 to 3 months later, a teacher would come back and be like, hey, I am kind of interested in it. It had nothing to do with me or those other teachers, but it's because if kids are showing that they are interested in it and they're excited about it, all of us as educators are like, well, what's that thing? It's just like if you're a parent and you can get your kid to eat something or take a nap or go to sleep right away. You're like, what is that method? I need to know about it, and I need to do it. And so the reaction is usually tempered by the results. And the results comes through the students, not just the excitement of being able to use VR, but what they're able to produce. So specifically in my school, I get more teachers coming to me now, because for the past, I guess I'm going on the second year, I've worked with this one teacher who is the art teacher around creating, having the kids tell stories through VR. And this was a person who was not a coder at all. And I mean, there's no coding really involved with this, but hadn't used VR prior to 2 years ago, but the principles were the same principles that she was trying to teach. And so making those connections to what a teacher is trying to do will lead to embracing the technology.
Yeah, well said. Like, your students are your best PR tool in that case. They're clamoring for it.
Yeah.
So I have a couple of technical questions that have come up. Amy's asking, what does it look like as a Unity plug? Jamie would like to know some of the export options. And Anonymous would like to know if found an easy route for schools to get Oculus sets to use.
So I heard the first
sort
one,
of like,
but not the second one very well.
oh,
but
sorry.
the first one.
Unity plugin, export options, and
Yeah.
how do you get Oculus Quest to your school?
All right, 3 questions, easy. So the first, the Unity plugin, it really is, so if you know Unity, you open Unity, and the first thing you're gonna do is you're gonna download Zoe, and it comes as a plugin. So it's just basically a layer on top of Unity. And it makes it easy for the students to start creating their experiences without needing to know how to do C# inside Unity. So the whole logic that I showed in VR, where there's actions and conditions and things that you can set up and toggles and like the simple interface is the same inside Unity. So if a student knows how to use the VR app and then they look at the Unity plugin, they'll see the same names, the same references. So it's like the same type of environment. For now, you cannot export from the virtual reality app to the Unity, but at one point you'll be able to do that as well. So it's all pretty much connected, but it just makes Unity easy. Like there's a couple of clicks and then you're done and you can start actually focusing on creating and less on trying to make Unity work, I guess. And we're partnering with them on the lesson plan side of things. So we're building lesson plans with the Unity team and working together on making those accessible on Zoe and on their website as well. So we have like we're following what they're doing as well, because they want to focus also on schools quite a bit, but it's still a game engine, so it's a complicated software, right, Kwaku?
Yeah, and actually, I wanted to say with that question, that the woman who asked that question actually works at the school that I used to work at with that first group, and so that's my original VR group that I worked with, and she's fantastic. But yeah, and you should mention that you were actually demoing you weren't using a Quest for your demo. You were doing that on a Rift, right?
Yeah, so it's working on the Quest, it's working on the Rift. For the Unity plugin can export to anything. And we're working on other platforms. We're just kind of doing voting based on the schools that we work with, which headset they like the best. So there's different options. There's the Microsoft headsets. There are the Focus Plus from HTC. There's another new headset now called Pico Neo 2 that's coming. So,
yep.
You know, it's in the end, it's cross-platform, and we'll just kind of do porting based on, I guess, demand. And then the question of how to get Quests for schools specifically. So that's a really great question, and it's not an easy answer.
Or maybe any headset. Maybe if you have a secret for any headset.
So, well, we're partnered up with most of the hardware manufacturers, so we can find ways to get the headsets. The Quest ones is the Quest is the hardest one to get these days, because it's pretty much sold out. We are also one of the, like, they have like their Oculus for Business system that's interesting, but the Quest is a higher price. But for those, you can get them right away. So they're bundling it it's good for like district sales, or if you're doing probably like a big number of sales, but they sell it for a much higher price than just the original one, which is $399, I believe. But it comes with management, so you can connect all the headsets together. You can have there's an IT framework where you can see what the battery looks like. You can push content on them automatically. So there's different options like that. And we work a lot also with the HTC, and then now the Pico team as well. So
yeah,
there's
I wanted to jump in and say that I don't have any secrets on how to get a school to buy hardware, but that I have heard from some people who are, their platforms are pretty hardware dependent, that in this time of remote learning, sending hardware home has actually been like a really great way for schools to have a kind of family engagement, to kind of keep in touch. And we're seeing it mostly around, access, just basic access to being able to participate in Zoom or kind of asynchronous classes, but it's scaling for, some of the more nice to have technologies that kids be using. And it's a way for kids to stay connected to school and schools to stay connected to families, even if they're not in the building all the time. So it's kind of a pitch that some people are making to their principals or even district level if there's any discretionary funding.
Yeah. I would say this, Emily and I have been talking with a couple of districts here in San Diego, and they're trying to do that exact thing, send software home. So this summer we're doing a camp where we're partnering our kids with kids in a different city. It's a small town called Downey, where the kids are going to work together. And we're going to partner one kid from my school with a kid from this other program, where the kids will work together to generate actual VR experiences. And so on our end, for our school, we've slowly been buying the Quests. So Emily will text me, she'll be like, they're available. And so I get online, and then I can maybe buy one, or they're sold out. So it's like every week I'm checking the website. I'm going to Best Buy, I'm going to Oculus, and I'm seeing if I can order one. And then even to the enterprise piece that she's talking about, it is, I think it's almost twice as much. But what I'm doing on my end is each time I get a new headset, I have to go in and I have to use something. Some of you might be familiar with this. I have to go and I have to put the Quest in developer mode, and then I need to go to SideQuest, and I need to download the software. And then after I do that, I need to buy Tilt Brush for each headset, and I have to do that manually. And if there are any updates, I have to do that manually. And I'm going to be sharing the headsets with students for the summer to be able to do this project. Yeah, Jamie, I'm hogging all the Quests, that's right. Oculus is making them for me exclusively. But if there are any issues, if there are any updates, then I'm going to have to go pick up that headset and do the update for the kids. And so that's a reason to do enterprise. Oculus just hasn't come up with an education version that's priced for schools yet. So it's something you're going to have to weigh. But I would initially buy a couple and just play with them and see what that does for you. That's what we did initially. Yeah. We only had like 2 to 3, and we just slowly built on that.
Yeah. And yeah, and I think their like business stuff is interesting for a few cases, but the pricing is a bit steeper, but it might be worth the trouble. You wouldn't need to do all this stuff afterwards, you know. It'll be all handled. It should be.
Well, saving educators time is a very noble practice. Like that's actually, you know, time is,
that's what we're telling them.
Time is the biggest commodity, right?
Yeah, and there's a few things we're doing on our end, but we can't do everything. Some of this stuff has to come from our hardware partners as well.
So a couple more questions, and then I have one final one to wrap up because we're almost at time. Do you recommend? I guess this is for both of this one's for either one of you. Do you recommend any base computers for students to have at home, or sort of getting them set up for success? I mean, Kwaku, you mentioned like configuring all the stuff ahead of time. Like, is there something that you kind of recommend specifically around VR to make sure is in place before you get students started?
That's a complex question. Part of the benefit of using something like a Quest or any sort of standalone is that you're not paying $1,200 plus for a desktop to be able to run VR. So if that doesn't feel, there's huge questions of equity around that, like who can afford that? I don't have that kind of computer personally. So I wouldn't feel comfortable saying get this computer. I don't know if maybe Emily could speak more to that.
Yeah.
I would say, and this is also tough, but I've done this with a teacher that I'm currently working with. If you are working with Quests, you can demo for people how to do that process that I just described, the idea of using SideQuest to download software and put things in developer mode. So that's something that you could model for kids. But I would not do that initially if this is a student's first time using VR. If it's something they're used to, then you can sort of move into that. I don't know, Emily, if you want to answer, if you want to add on to that.
Yeah, in terms of computers, I think so. I mean, it's also from your experience and other experience we have had with teachers. I think the standalone headsets are the best way to go in terms of ease of use and working, and instead of focusing on the PC versions. Because if you do want to run an Oculus Rift with a PC, then you need a pretty powerful PC, which is going to be about probably $1,000. You're right. I mean, they're getting cheaper now, but you do need a PC that works pretty well, right, to run the graphics card of a. And I'm not sure the benefits will be much greater depending on what you're using. There's a lot of apps on the standalone headset which are great. And the new like Pico Neo headset looks like a pretty good competitor to the Quest. We're actually testing it out now, so we'll let you know how it goes. And what's interesting with them is they provide us vendors with the ability of just pushing all the updates ourselves as a vendor. So that's really cool. Like we can just do all the updates in all the schools. We don't need to take. So there's advantages there in doing that type of thing. But yeah, PC.
And really the dream is that it's all in the headset. Like you're creating VR in VR for a VR experience.
Yeah, exactly.
So in
Just
a way you kind of are
embedded in that
bypassing,
device.
you're bypassing the computer part of it if you have the right initial setup.
But concretely today, if you're using Quest for like a camp you're doing soon, or the classes and their students are at home, they're gonna need to be able to at least plug it into a computer at one point, I guess. There's a hard way to bypass that, but it can be any computer. It can be it doesn't need to, it's not gonna run on the computer, but you might need to just plug it into, I don't know, transfer a file or do things like that. So you will need access to a computer. And then another thing is you'll need some cables. That's just a very technical thing, but there's a few cables and adapters that you do need to be able to plug it in correctly into that. What else can I add? In Zoe, we have all of that, like all that process of installing the headset, putting it in developer mode if you need to, all this stuff. We have like a lot of very easy guides to follow. So if you're lost at one point, you're just gonna go in there and then look at them. And we kind of summarize for all headset how that all works.
And is Zoe open source? Can people contribute to Zoe?
Not yet. So there's discussion. We're having various discussions around open sourcing the core, like so the base of it, the whole SDK and API. Also because we're going to be working with universities on research projects and things like that. So this is still an open question for the open sourcing side of the core, but it definitely would be interesting. There's, especially for the VR app, there's an opportunity for people to code and add new components to it easily. So that might be something to make it more collaborative as a tool. If, I don't know, a student is really good at C#, he could actually build a new action and then add it in the app. So, all of those things are in the process.
Yeah. But in the meantime, students create their own libraries of their objects, so they can use them over and over again, and like that's all part of their thing.
Yeah. It's like they get their own project, they create their own scenes, they create their game, all of that.
Yeah. And then I just had one last question for you guys, which is, what are some of the benefits of a product developer like you, Emily, and an educator like you, Kwaku, working together? Like, how has that relationship been, and like, how has it been different maybe than other just sort of ed tech products that you tried to bring in?
Do you want to go first, Emily?
I can. I mean, for us, it's definitely invaluable to work with educators that way, because it helps us build and shape some of what we're doing based on on the needs of the actual people doing things with the students, right? And so I think that's super important for any company doing these types of things, because, and especially with new and immersive technologies, you want to make sure that what you're building makes sense. And so, I mean, it's been inspiring for us too, like doing those pilots with you last summer. A lot of what happened there just shaped what we have today as a software, right? So I think, at least for the company side of things, definitely super important, I think, for anyone doing, especially VR, and doing a company that's doing VR and education, to just kind of collaborate that way is it's huge, I guess. What's from your perspective? Like, have you done that before? And
kind of, but not to this degree. I would say the challenge that on the school side that we normally have if we're bringing in software is that when people are creating things, they're creating it for the largest audience possible. And so you're looking at the software and you're like, how do I get that to fit into what we're trying to do here? And the best part about having this kind of relationship is I think I was meeting with this art teacher and I was like, hey, I'm not sure how to do this. She's like, I'm not sure how to do it either. And so I'm like, all right, well, let me WhatsApp Emily and see if we're doing something wrong. So there's that. But then there's also the customizable piece of it as well, where we're like, hey, we really need students to do this. Now, if I'm trying to do something with like a larger company like Google or whatever, there might be a message board where I can type something, and if it gets upvoted enough, maybe it ends up on their roadmap, which would come into production 2 to 3 years down the road. With this, it's literally like, hey, Emma, this would be great if we could do this. Is this possible? And she's like, yes, this is when this is going to be possible. Here's this version of it, or it's going to be available by this point in November. And then from my perspective, I can plan with the teacher and say, all right, great, we're going to be able to do this a couple of months down the road, let's start with the planning stuff. We know that the tech piece is going to be there. That kind of, I think every school should have this sort of relationship with companies, because it makes it not only just I don't even have to justify buying it for my school, but it also makes it easier to plan and to teach with, essentially.
Yeah. I mean, that's a great plug for like, I hope every educator there is excited about that idea, because as a former user researcher, we're always trying to get teachers to talk to us about like the product and like how it's working. So it's a real upvote, for getting your voice into the product. And I imagine that something that you want to use in your classroom is actually something that a lot of teachers might have the need for. So all of that, like, specific customization could actually be really universal in some ways.
Yeah.
One last question. How can students share the experiences they make? And then we'll have to say goodbye.
Yeah, that makes sense. So in the VR app today, it's similar to things like Tiltbrush or Quill. So you have to be in the app to be able to share things. Screen recording is also a great way for them to be able to share what they've done. The other way is you can just transfer the project to each other. Like if you're at one point, you want to get all the projects from your student, just ask them to send it's a file. It's called .story, and it has the name of their project. They just send it to you. It's not heavy at all. It's like a little file that they send over, and then when you upload it, it'll be in their experience. So that's the way for now that this works. And then we're just going to be figuring out different options for like YouTube sharing, live streaming,
Yeah, I was thinking social media, like that.
Yeah, use social media in that way. But the best way to experience an app that a kid didn't know is to actually put on a headset and actually, play the game, So that will be like the best way to do it. Or on your phone as well, that could work too pretty well for the younger kids to be able to experience some of because what is kind of cool also is we're going to have a huge library of student-made projects at one point, and then you can have younger students experience some of the things that some of the older students did as well, and I think that's super interesting. And I remember from last summer, one of the students did that. He did an app for the younger students to experience about, I think it was the ocean, cleaning the ocean or something.
Yep. Yeah.
But his main target were the younger students, actually, that he was doing this for them. And that was interesting, I think, as a concept too. So
I would add on to that with the distance learning piece, the thing that you just did right now, how you were demoing it with your computer, you can, for those, I'm sure a lot of us are using this in schools, you could actually live stream that through Zoom and record that as well as a teacher, but also as students. So whether you're on campus or you're off campus, that immediately, that's a way you could do it. But I know a lot of the things that Emily mentioned, they're on the roadmap that are coming out.
Yeah.
Will make it even easier to share finished products.
Yeah, most of the schools who come into the program will get access to all those like new like mobile, the way for you teachers to see all the kids what they're doing through your mobile phone, and that's kind of cool to do, and you can share things that way. So, all those, it's all roadmap stuff, but it's coming.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much. I'm sorry for my glitching. I know some people were having some trouble hearing me, but thanks for sticking it out. Thanks everyone for coming today. We're talking about students as creators using VR, and already some teachers are talking about bringing this into their VR club, which is really exciting. And I also want to say, don't forget that this is just the first in a series that we're doing with women creating VR products, talking to educators about how they're used in the classroom. Next week, we're talking to Jessica Hendricks from Killer Snails. And then on Thursday, the 25th, we're going to talk to Anurupa Ganguly about her new product, Prism VR, which is about teaching math and physics in VR.
Yeah, both.
So I hope you guys... Yeah, exactly. As we've been saying, Emily and I, as we plan the series, it's really hard to find math teachers using VR. So we're excited about that. Also, somebody asked if the session recorded. It will be. And so we'll post according to maybe the registration page where you signed up for the webinar.
Yep, exactly.
So you can find it there.
Yep.
Okay, great. Well, thank you guys. Thank you, Kwaku. Thank you, Emily. It was so great to talk to you and spend some time together. And I look forward to doing it again next week.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Thanks, guys.
Bye. Thanks, everyone.